Well, welcome to the Take Ownership podcast, everyone, where we dive into taking ownership, whether it be in business, real estate, or just life in general. I'm your host, Josh Smith, and today's guest is someone I've seen in passing but never actually had the pleasure to sit down with until today. So now she's a full-time business consultant, real estate investor, and is a passionate advocate for housing equity. Now we'll explore what that actually means, who she's aiming to serve, and how her expertise can help you. And with over 20 years in business consulting experience, she is well versed in one, systematizing businesses, two, navigating challenges, which we all know in business that's always going to come up regardless of where you're at, and three, securing grants. Now, that's an important one because there is a lot of opportunity in that space that people are very likely not aware of. So, as mentioned, this is my very first real conversation with this guest, but I have a strong feeling she is going to provide some insights you will not want to miss. And if you're a business owner, you know we can use all the help we can get. So, with that, I'd like to welcome to the podcast Miss Luz Ramirez. Luz, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for having me on today.
You are very welcome. It is such a pleasure. So, how I like to get these things started off is just a little bit more on kind of what your backstory is, what your background is. Obviously, I gave some of the highlights, but there's definitely 100% more to it, to the story than that. So,
Okay, so let's see how far back I go. So, one of the biggest things about me is that I was born and raised in the US, but my parents are both from Colombia. And so I was raised in a very traditional household. We spoke Spanish only in home, and outside of the home, that's when I learned English, and that's what the educational system was for. So up until about age, I would say 4, I really only spoke Spanish, and that was all our traditions were very specific to our country and our traditions. And once I started going to school, I started to learn English, and from there it was kind of a outside of the home, I experienced the culture of being outside of a Colombian household, and then in the home it was all the traditional Colombian l- life, I guess is what you want to call it. So I was raised very biculturally and bilingual, fully bilingual. So the reason that that's important is that for me, everything I have done in my life has always connected back to my roots and my culture. So I've been a performer my whole life, and that started out by being involved in performing Colombian dances, listening to the music, singing the music. And that opened up doors for me that normally would not have been traditional to anybody else, which then led me to becoming a dancer, very much in the public eye. And as I moved on through my elementary years, my high school years, my college years, I got very involved in the performing arts world. And that connected me to many people. And so again, my network was people who would come see me perform and people who knew my parents, and they were all in all aspects of the community. And so I had a lot of odd jobs growing up, but these were jobs that were offered to me because I was bilingual, because they knew my family, because they knew what I did. And so that opened up the door to education, which I was not intending to be an educator, but I ended up being in the education world. I ended up being a teacher. I worked for a public school system for 16 years, and I worked in all levels of administration and education. So I was an administrator, I was a teacher recruiter, I ran departments. At the end, my last job was working with the superintendent, and I was on her cabinet, and I started programs and departments. I started so charter schools were new to us at that time, so I did the auditing of the charter schools, monitored them. So there were a lot of things I was able to do and have exposure to. My degree was actually in business administration with an emphasis in performing arts, so that was kind of a tie to the performing and the business world. I've always been very practical, so my intent was never to go off to Hollywood or New York and be a performer. So my mindset was always like, I love to do that, but business is my thing. So I ended up in the education world as a fluke because, like I said, we had been connected to the education individuals in the education world here, and they needed bilingual teachers. And so that was my tie into it. So I was able to test and acquire a temporary teaching certificate, which is how I ended up being a teacher. I was a bilingual teacher, taught for 5 years in elementary, and then was able to acquire positions and kind of move up the ladder because of my business degree. I then pursued my business, my master's in administration and supervision, and that again expanded my role in administration. When I left the education world, I was offered a position as the executive director of a nonprofit, and I joined that nonprofit. I was there for about 4 years. The nonprofit faced some issues with the state funding, and so we looked at opportunities to continue the agency as it was, and it was not possible without the funding. So I was able to work with a friend of mine who was the CEO of another agency of a nonprofit, and we did an acquisition. So I managed the acquisition of the nonprofit that I oversaw into the new nonprofit, restarted all the programs, restarted everything, and acquired more programming. I stayed on with that agency and became the chief administrative officer. I was there for 9 years, and in that time was able to double the staff that we had at the agency, created additional programs, and created additional departments. And I actually left, like you said, I left my W-2 a couple weeks ago, and it was an excellent opportunity for me to really implement everything I learned along my path. Which was my stint in education, my business background in the performance world. I was able to tie that in because I love being out there, talking to people and learning what is needed and filling those gaps. And anytime I see a challenge, I love to step up and say, oh my gosh, this is a challenge I want to take on, and I want to solve it. I want to fix it. I want to make it happen. So I think that's been my thing, is all along, every step of the way. It doesn't matter what I've done. I love a challenge. And once I meet the challenge, then I need to move on to the next one. So even though I've had longevity within all the places I've worked in, I usually get bored around the fourth or fifth year, and I need to find something new. And so once I've met the challenge, I'm like, okay, what's next? What's next? And I kind of felt that at my W-2, I'd hit that point where I need to move on. I need to do something else. And my husband had said to me, you grow, you help everybody else grow and do more. And you're doing all this work for them. But you need to look at us as a business and as, and what we're doing. And if you put all your skills to work for us, imagine where we could be. And this mindset kind of started after COVID. We had a lot of time to, process and think. At least he did. I worked harder than I've ever worked because we were in a nonprofit world. And so we had to find ways to get funding out and food out to people. So I was actually working longer hours during COVID times than before. So, but that got me thinking on, things are different now. Let's see how we can make this happen. And so I started my transition, and it was a 2.5 year transition out of my W-2 into where I am now, to finally say, you know what, I'm doing this on my own, and I'm now going to move forward. And the idea of that financial freedom has been like the driver behind it, that I can do what I want for me, but still have the challenges that I want to put before myself. So as I'm doing the work that I'm doing, I see all these as new challenges, and I'm so excited about, what I can accomplish with all the different challenges I have before me. So
Oh,
that's a lot.
that is awesome. That's spoken. Thank you for that. That's really helpful to get that whole background. Definitely spoken like a true entrepreneur, looking for the next challenge, embracing challenges. I love that. I think one of the things that I noticed throughout that was obviously your ability to pivot. I mean, going from a performing arts where usually, I mean, I have six sisters, and a lot of them, they're more on the artistic side, or
Mhm.
yeah, they're more in the arts. That's really their background. And actually, one of my sisters, she's in specifically performing arts. She's a dance teacher. And when you have that mindset, it's not as common for that to correlate to, hey, I want to run a business. So that's to have both of those. That's pretty neat, and being able to pivot back and forth between that. That's pretty cool. So that's awesome. So with what you're doing right now, obviously you just left the W-2 a couple weeks ago, and you've
Mhm.
got the business consulting firm. Who's your primary client at this point in time? Like, who's your ideal client or avatar you're going after?
So, being part of Owners Club has really given me the opportunity to connect with a lot of individuals who are in the real estate investing world. And that investing world looks very different for everyone because some of them are working with RV parks, others are working with multifamily, others are doing fix and flip. So they're all over. But the one thing that is consistent across the board is that everyone is passionate about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And they're really good at it.
Mhm.
The one thing that I've noticed though is that many are struggling with that, with the structure of business. It's like I love doing this, and so I've started my company and my business doing this, but it's getting so big that I can't manage, or I don't even know how to do that. I'm not interested in doing that. I don't want to deal with, putting systems in place. I don't want to deal with, but I'm having some growing pains, and I'm having to deal with staff. I'm having to deal with people. I'm having to deal with, numbers. I'm having to deal with paperwork, and I don't want to deal with any of that.
Mhm.
So as I'm seeing this, it's kind of a common thread with everybody that for me, the ideal client is to help all of these investors accomplish what they want and grow bigger and do their thing while helping them put all their systems and processes in place. And yeah, that's kind of the target group that I'm focusing right now. I mean, I could just branch it out and say I'll work with anybody, but I have a passion for real estate investing as well. And so I can relate to that, and I can relate to the areas that we're really good at, and I can relate to the areas that, that's not for me and that's not something I enjoy doing. So I don't want to do it. Let's let somebody else help me put this in place and organize it. And then, you know, they know what they're doing, but I can focus on what I'm really good at. And so for me, it being a real estate investor is not my thing, but it's something that my husband and I stumbled into. We said, you know what, this is a great way for us to get that financial freedom that we want, but it's not my thing. I'm really a systems and processes person, so I'm good at looking and finding the properties and doing the back office kind of analysis and just saying, you know what, look into this further, go after that, and then he does all the property management, he does all the work. I don't want to deal with any of that, but I love being at the office doing all the back office things. And so thinking from that perspective, I'm like, yeah, I can see how I fit into working with investors on helping them do that. I don't want to do the thing that they're doing, but I can do the back stuff office stuff that they don't want to do. So that I can do.
That's
Hmm.
awesome. Now I can tell obviously you definitely have very heavy on the visionary aspect, but you're also very well coupled with an integrator type role. Like you're the operations side. You seems like you're super sharp. To have both of those and be proficient at both that's impressive. That's neat. It kind of goes back to the again the performing arts and then a business major.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's awesome right there.
Thank you.
So as far as so your business consulting is really focused on real estate investors, and you mentioned you kind of stumbled upon that. So as far as your investing journey, what does that look like so far?
So we have been investing in single family homes and duplexes, most recently duplexes. We've been increasing that side. We have 8 doors, which is not a lot, but we're moving in that direction. We started again slowly, but moving there. So my next step is I actually want to have been actively looking for multifamily. That is where we want to grow to next. I'm looking for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, maybe in that range. I would like to find something local so that I can grow our portfolio locally, and my husband can continue doing what he's doing, which is doing the management of the properties, fixing up and whatnot. But I am very much open and actively looking to partner with individuals who are also doing the same thing in other areas outside of Illinois. I don't love Illinois for investing for all the obvious reasons. They are not landlord friendly. But it is my backyard, and I'm very familiar with this area. So if I were to find multifamilies within my community, my area, I know where they're poised. I know where they're located. I know, if they're a good investment or not. That's what I'm doing here. But I do want to invest outside of Illinois for all the obvious reasons that most other states, with the exception of a few of them, are landlord friendly. And so partnering on those types of deals is what I'm looking to do. I am working with a multifamily Latino group, and our focus there is purchasing multifamily, large multifamilies, where we can empower the Latino community to become investors, even if it's on a small scale, but help them build and create a legacy for their families. Most Latino families aren't thinking about legacy, or they haven't been taught how to build a legacy and how to create something for their children when they pass on, or anything bigger than just the day to day. So this is an opportunity for us to bring them into investing world on a small scale where they can still start building up that legacy. And then as they learn more and they see more how their funds are, giving back and building that legacy, then they can learn more and grow more as investors. And then maybe they'll take it to the next step. So that's a project that we're currently working on.
I love that. So is that going to be more along the lines of, I'm trying to think of like what the structure would be on that. Is it more of a, they come in and partner with you on specific deals, or you do going to do like a fund eventually, or
Yes.
what's your play there?
Yes, yes, we're actually looking at a fund. So there are different ways to do it, but right now the one that we're working on is building a fund. They would come in and invest in the fund, and then we would go ahead and purchase the multifamilies, and then we would hold those, so we'd stabilize them, and then start paying them their dividends. Ideally, what we see is oftentimes you see a lot of developing going on, and the people who are working on these developments are minorities, and so you see them going to work, and they're just the employee. Again, we're trying to
Break that mindset.
change that mindset, pull
Yeah.
people away from being the employee and become the investor, become part of what you're building. And so that's kind of the plan right there, getting them to that point, to seeing, not only can you be the worker, but you can also be investing in what you are working on, what you're
That's
building.
awesome. And I was actually, so you mentioned investing in Illinois, not necessarily being the most ideal. It's funny. I was talking to the Bissones the other day, and so Patrick, not Michelle's husband, Patrick, but Patrick, their CFO,
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
actually heavily invested in Illinois area, and he's got like
Yes.
large multi-family units out there, and he seems to absolutely love it. So he might be a good one to talk to as well.
Yeah, yes, yes. He's from Chicago.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he's a fun guy to talk to. I got to go to their workshop early in January, and this guy's super sharp individual. So
Yeah, he is.
he's a fun one to talk to. Uh,
Absolutely.
so with that, yeah. So as far as obviously you're in the business consulting space, but with all the advancements in, say, AI, obviously you're very heavily focused on processes within the business. Where do you kind of see your industry going in the near term and long term? Like, what do you see shifting?
That's an interesting question. It, it- I've been doing a lot of grant writing,
Mhm.
um, just as a result of working in the nonprofit world, and actually even in education. And so you're always tapping into the funds that you can access to be able to move your programs or fill gaps for your programs. And it was interesting because I've been doing everything, from start to finish. I write everything up, and then I go through and I edit and I tweak, and then I send them to my CEO and I say, okay, can you review the narrative, see if there's anything that you want to edit in there, anything you need to change. It was a back and forth, right? And one day I walked into her office and she says, I have got to show you something. I said, well, what is it? She goes, have you heard of Chat GPT? I said, no, what is this? She goes, watch. She copied something that I had sent her and she plugs it into Chat GPT and she says, okay, um, edit this to blah, 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 blah. I don't remember what she typed in, and she says, and hit send. And then it sends it back to me and I read it. I'm like, oh my gosh, you just changed my life, and probably took hours off of my grant writing.
Huge time
So,
savings.
oh my gosh,
Huge.
I mean, I can't even, there's no words. So it really has shaped, it changed the way I work, the way I write my grants. I still write all my grants. I still write everything, but then I run it through kind of as a filter. And sometimes these grants require you to keep everything under 500 words. Sometimes it's under 1,500 characters. So it just depends. So this has allowed me to kind of run it through through the Chat GPT or the AI that I'm using at the time, ask it to help me restructure the paragraphs or the narrative or the information I need to meet the requirements of the grant. And that has shaved so much time from just the work that I'm doing. So that's a small example of how AI can just help increase the efficiency, how making me more efficient on what I'm doing. I'm already a very efficient person. I
Yeah.
get things done in such a quick time. It's unbelievable. So what people do in 40 hours, I can usually get done in 10 hours. but I'm a very focused person. So I'm structured and focused. And so that helps. So when I'm focusing on something and I'm working on something, like there are no distractions. The world could be burning down around me and I haven't caught whiff of it because I'm focused on what I'm doing. So the use of AI has just allowed me to really become even more efficient in getting things done even faster. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, I do a lot of research. A lot of what I do is research. I'm very much into checking everything, fact checking everything, making sure that I'm using multiple sources to inform the information that I'm writing up or that I'm putting together. So AI has allowed me to kind of pull more information together and bring me additional sources that I wasn't searching for. Or, like I said, again, the efficiency of it. Sometimes I'm updating information on what is the demographic for this community that I'm writing an application for. I can just plug that into AI and say, I need the demographics for the past year for this community on this, and this, and it sends it right back to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would have been 3 hours of research because I would have to have gone and looked at four different I would have had to gone through census.gov. I would have had to have gone through, three other sources to verify that the information that I'm getting is for the accurate year. It has just changed the way I work.
That's
And it's
awesome.
amazing. Also, well, the other thing is that it does scare me a little bit because I don't want it to become a crutch and I don't want it to become something that I rely on solely. So I do try to manage the two, I think in a wise way, not depend on it so much that I start to lose how to do the thing that I've always done, and that's my skill set.
Mhm.
So I use it, but I'm not using it as a crutch. So,
No, that's smart. I've
mhm,
got kind of the same thoughts on it, and it's just amazing what it can do. I don't think any of us are at the level to where we know exactly all of its capabilities. I feel like every day I'm learning something. Like April Elias, she's in this YouTube cohort that I'm a part of, and some of the
mhm.
prompts she sends us, I'm like, where did you even come up with this? This is genius. This is super helpful. I mean, that really helps. Like it, even just something as simple as cutting down the data that it's bringing back to you, like putting it in a table format instead of it
Yes.
being this long response. Like just
Mhm.
simple stuff like that. The efficiency that it brings is it's just absolutely phenomenal. But do you see, because I think from, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, all business, it's a people. We're all in the people business. I don't care which field you're in. AI is going to be a huge impact, but from a business consulting side of things, do you really think, like, you think it's something that could take away your job fully 100% by any means in the near future?
So that's an interesting question. And I think my answer to that is no, only because you will always have people who don't want to do it. So they could probably they could research everything, they could pull up all the steps on how to do it. They can say, okay, this is all I have to do. The majority of people will not want to do it. They're not interested, or it's not in their wheelhouse to work in that manner. And so they'll just give it to somebody else who actually enjoys doing it, knows how to do it, has executed that step or that process before, and they'll just pay for it. So I think that no, I think that there will be the people that will do it and prefer to do it themselves. I am one of those who likes to look up something and then I determine, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is something I can do. I'm going to do it. But now I also weigh the time that it takes to do it. And then I say, okay, is it really worth my time to invest in doing this? Or am I better off contacting somebody who's an expert at it and knows how to do it and pay them to do it? And my choice is usually, you know what, I'm going to pay somebody to do that. I could do it, but I don't want to do it. So I don't think so. I don't think that AI could step in and take over in that manner.
I agree with that. I think it's just going to be a very effective tool, and the people that don't adopt it, they're just going to be left behind, unfortunately. I mean, it's an unfortunate matter of it, but the
Mhm.
thing is, what I've noticed is if you don't have expertise in the field that you're asking about, you're going to be putting out garbage completely. Because I've like I use it more on kind of if I'm having writer's block on something, and it's typically going to be on a topic that I'm very well versed in, and I can poke holes in it because like no, that was wrong. I mean, it gets a majority of it right, but there's still like at least 10% of it where like that is completely hole. I'm
I
sorry.
agree. I agree with that. Yes, I will go through and pull up stuff and I'm like, yeah, I don't really agree with you on this. I'm
Yeah.
going to research some more. And then you just have to know how to ask what you need to help you in what you're doing. So I use it as a tool. I don't use it as something that's going to replace what I'm doing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that. And so, as far as the research side of things, is there a particular platform that you favor more than the other as far as gaining research quickly?
No, I mean, it just depends on what I'm researching. I love learning and I love having the facts. And that's just always been like my curious side of things. So, and this is a bad habit I have, but if I'm in the middle of a conversation and somebody says something and I'm listening and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I start digging, I start researching right there and pulling up stuff, or I'll type it in just so I don't forget it so I can get back to it later. But I want to know more. And so for me, but I want to make sure that the information I'm getting is coming from all perspectives. I'm not just getting one source. So for me, it's about I go down the rabbit hole. That's quite honestly it. I will research um, on lots of different platforms and I will dig through many different sources. And even when I find one source, then I'll start digging through that source and saying, oh, well, where did you get your sources? And then I start looking at those sources and then I start digging into those. So to me, I enjoy that because I'm just there are people that would rather just, no, please, I don't want to research anything. I don't want even to sit at the computer. I don't want, please get that out of my way. But I enjoy that. The more I can discover, the deeper I can get, the more I'm like, wow, so that's where that came from. That's really interesting. And so where's that taking me? And sometimes I get lost in the, in the weeds going, okay, but for me, that's all part of the process. And then now I've got more information that I can pull from. And maybe that is part of the skill set of when I am writing these grant applications or when I am putting a program together, I found information that I was able to use that wouldn't be useful or somebody else wouldn't have considered useful. But for me, that is actually making my application stronger or making my, what I'm putting forth stronger.
That's great.
So.
I think your next role, so obviously because you like to switch from roles to roles once you've mastered it.
Mhm.
It might be a professional investigator for your next role, to be honest with you.
I'm
But
also not nosy, so that's interesting. I'm not a nosy person, so I don't know if that would be of interest to me.
yeah, that's funny. But so back to the research briefly on, so say the real estate market, like the real estate niche in general,
Mhm.
when you're doing market research on a particular area, is there a specific chat tool or specific AI tool that you favor on that type of like the initial research on that, or are you still going to like the individual sites like the census, stuff like that?
So I started using ChatGPT and I was using it so often that I just ended up paying for the subscription. And then I heard about DeepSeek recently, and so I started playing with that one. So actually, I'm working on both right now, just trying to see which one I like better or what one is giving me versus the other one. So that as an AI platform, those are the two that I'm actually using. Um, and then I've noticed that depending on the information that I ask it, it is usually guiding me to the sources that I normally typically would go to. So if depending on what I'm asking, it will say, "Oh, good, census.gov said this, and the Illinois Housing said this," and then I'm like, "Okay, well, yeah, those are all the sources I typically use." So I'm basically confirming that the sources that I go to for the specific area that I'm working on is what it's pulling up, and so that just gives me a little bit of peace. So when I do click in on the different sources, I'm like, okay, great. So then I go directly to the source and I'll do more research and digging there. But it has saved me time in the sense that when I originally would go to that source, I would have to go to multiple places within that source, digging for the information that I wanted, not finding necessarily what I needed. So I would do search engine questions and say, I am looking for da 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 da. And then it would give me feedback. I'm like, no, no, no. And I'd retype it and say, okay, I actually want da 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 da. And then I'd type, and then it'd send me something else. I'm like, okay, yes and no. If you could just put the two together. So it's a lot of back and forth, back and forth. AI, ChatGPT, has been able to just get me what I'm looking for all in one statement. Now, I do need to verify my sources, so I do go looking for it. So I like to do that as well. I want to make sure I don't take exactly what it tells me, but now I'm like, okay, I'll click on whatever link it gives me and then I'll verify that the information is factual. And sometimes I find, oh, okay, you're giving me information from a range of 2014 to 2019. I'm actually looking for something from 2017 to 2021. See, so I still have to go in there and verify and pull the information I'm looking for specifically. But those are the two that I'm using, and I'll just do different search engines. Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think that's super helpful. From April was also mentioning one it might be worth looking at. I haven't tried it out yet, but she says for market trends that it's especially useful. It's called Perplexity.
Perplexity. I have heard of that one actually.
Perplexity. She says it's pretty decent. I haven't tried it out yet, but I'm still deciding on if I'm going to try out DeepSeek as well. I've heard it's pretty powerful. Yeah, there's so much out there.
Yeah, and
It
it's interesting because it what it will give you is first it gives you its thought process. So it gives you all that information. It says, okay, so they're asking for this, and so then my answer would be this. But wait a minute, they also are asking for this. So then what I should do is, and it gives you that information. It breaks it down for you, the thought process that DeepSeek is going through, and then it gives you the answer. So I'm like, huh. Well, isn't that interesting? So yeah, it like I said, I've
that's
been playing
nice.
around
I
with
like
it.
that.
Yeah, I'm not there yet to actually take all the information and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to go with, but I'm playing with it. I'm getting to know it.
It's nice. You get to see the why behind it. That's always helpful for me. See
Yes.
where it's coming from. 'Cause I
Yes.
like to break things down like that too. I was in my prior role, I was a process engineer, so I like to
Okay.
see what the actual process looks like. So it's super
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
So I know
Engineer
you
mind.
mentioned grants quite a bit, and I know you're pretty much you've been dubbed the grant queen practically in our circles.
Yeah,
So
which
I
is
want to
interesting.
understand like when did that come into play? Like throughout your roles? I mean, obviously you were in the performing arts, you were in multiple businesses. When did that come into play and kind of what brought it about?
I think I've always been involved in grant writing even in a small way throughout. So you see opportunities, you see foundations, you see different groups where, hey, there's this $5,000 opportunity, there's this $10,000 opportunity. So I was part of Junior League early on, long, long time ago. And so that is an organization where you do projects within your community. And I was part of it for many, many years. And so that's where it started, doing some grant writing and getting some funds. Then in the education world, you're also looking for funding all the time. And so I applied for, opportunities there. It really kind of comes down to, hey, there's some funding available. And then you fill out the application, you submit it, and then you hope that you get it. And then if you do get it, you're like, great, I can put this towards what I originally intended. So it just kind of happened. It wasn't something that I set out to do, but I am a good writer and I'm a very structured, detailed person. And so that is very important when you're writing. So it just kind of happened that I was good at what a grant writing requires. So it's not something that I said, hey, I'm going to be a grant writer. It's okay, nobody else can do this or no one else wants to do it, so I'll do it. And I actually enjoy the process. I enjoy the research. I enjoy the making sure it's done accurately, done correct, that everything that's being asked for, I'm providing. When I would look at other applications and say, you didn't even answer the question. So I guess it's just a challenge for myself that I can do it the right way. So as I progressed in every position I had, and as I moved into the nonprofit world, it just sort of became a thing that, if I needed funding or I wanted to grow a program, or I saw a program and I saw that there was something missing, I'm like, hey, I'm going to see if there's an opportunity to provide funding through a grant that I can fulfill that need. And that's just kind of how it became. So I did not set out to be a grant writer in any of the jobs I had. It just kind of ended up being something I did to support what I was doing. And so in my last role, at the end there, because I've been transitioning out of that role for a while, I had to build the capacity up of my supervisors into directors. And then the goal was to pass on all programs to directors where I no longer had to do anything other than have slight oversight with them. The departments, the other programs I created, moved them into another department. We hired a director. So once I hit a point where I had no oversight over any programs or departments, then I really just ended up doing grant writing. And so that's really been the focus of my last year has been the grant writing, but it just kind of became something I did. And the more I did, the better I got. And so every grant application I'd submit, we'd get. There are very few grants that I have not received funding for in the last few years. And so it just kind of became a skill set. So when I was talking to Pace kind of brought up like, oh my gosh, you do grant writing. I said, yeah, but it's not a big deal. It's just something I do as part of my job. He goes, are you kidding? And so, like you said, I got dubbed the grant queen. It wasn't something that I would say this is what I do.
Yeah.
It's just something that I can do. And so in the world that we're living in right now with grants, it's kind of like the shiny object syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Something new pops up and you're interested in doing that, and it's like the trendy thing or it's the new thing. Well, the same thing happens in grants. Funding usually follows whatever is trendy or whatever is in, whatever the theme is. And so sometimes it's education, sometimes it's early education, sometimes it's I don't know, there could be different areas that the funding will follow. Well, all of a sudden they've realized that there's a housing crisis across the United States. And the funding sources are starting to discover that, okay, if we do not put funding into these sources, into this area, the crisis is going to get bigger and bigger. And so right now we are actually in a time where the federal government is finding that there is a need for more housing. And so they're pushing funding that way. Not only funding for housing, but funding for certain areas of certain pockets of populations that need housing. So we're talking about veterans, housing for veterans, housing for homeless, housing for transitional housing for individuals reentering society from prison, incarceration, housing for victims of or survivors of domestic violence, senior living. The baby boomers, I mean, they are now living, moving into assisted living. So there's more funding needed for that. So there is a lot of funding available and a lot of funding for housing. And so that is kind of the connection on where grant writing is kind of making its way into as an opportunity for investors. Because a lot of the individuals in our community are working on housing a lot of these populations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, one of the things I'm super passionate about is providing a path to home ownership for those that maybe otherwise couldn't qualify. So, I mean, I really like the way Pace is doing it as far as like the lease option strategy. So that's one facet of it. But I'm also, I mean, I'm interested in exploring all avenues. I just want to get it accomplished for these people. How it gets accomplished, that's kind of you figure that out as you go along. But I was looking into, I mean, obviously you've got a vast amount of experience in these grants. So what's the ones you're referring to? Are they called, so are they the CDBGs? I was looking that up the other day. It's Community Development Block Grants.
Yeah, so
Is it?
community development block grants, the way grants usually work is many grants will start at the federal level and then they get sent out to the state level. The state level will then send them out to the different states or counties or communities, cities, towns. And then that's where the Community Block Development Grant funds come from, CBDG grants. And so this is where the city or the town or the city town can then take those funds and then put a plan in place on how they want to spend those funds. And the funds are meant to develop their community. That's exactly what they are, community block development grants. And they will actually work on a plan that they put together for the next 2, 3, or 4 years. And then they will do input from the community. They will look at what they need to help develop their community into what they want it to look like. So it's actually one of the best grants that are local, where if you are falling into, you look at the plan that the city has put in place and you say, you know what, this is something I can work towards, then you could actually apply for funds that will work towards part of that plan that they've put in place. So if the plan says that we need to create more housing for veterans, homeless veterans, then what do you need to do is you create housing for the homeless veterans. You look at the funding and you see what they are asking for or what they want from you, and then you basically provide them what they want. So when you apply for that funding, you say, I am going to develop housing for veterans, and I'm going to check, cross off everything that they've said they want in there, and you're going to provide that. And then when you submit your application, if they fund you, you just do what you said you were going to do, which is also what they said they were going to fund you for.
Yeah. Makes
So
sense
it's very, I mean, I say it's very simple,
for
but
you.
all you're doing, yeah, well, but what you're doing as the person, as the investor or the developer or the person who's going to be providing what they want, all you have to do is give them what they are asking for. So the plan will actually tell you what they need, and you say, I'm going to give you what you need, and then they will give you the funding so you provide what they need.
Sounds
It,
simple
it's
when you put it that way, but obviously,
it's
I
it,
mean, I would imagine with that amount of funding, because I'm sure it's not, it's probably pretty substantial. I mean, when you're talking at a nationwide scale for sure, but from like, what's the oversight look like on something like that? I would imagine there'd have to be some check-ins or something
oh,
along those
absolutely.
lines.
So that's the thing. So you get free funding through grants, but it's not no strings attached. So
That's a good thing.
obviously you have to be a good steward of the funds that you're receiving. And so how do you do that? It's just like when you get audited, okay? They're checking to see that you're doing everything in the correct way. It's the same way for grants. When you receive the grants, they're going to tell you, okay, the requirements that you need to meet now to demonstrate that you should be receiving these funds and that you can keep these funds is that you have to meet these following requirements. So they may say to you, you have to do quarterly reporting. And in this quarterly report, you need to provide to us how you spent the funds that you will receive for that quarter. Sometimes they give them to you in quarterly payments. Sometimes they give you all the funds up front. Sometimes it's a reimbursement basis. Sometimes you are the one who has to spend, and then you submit all your receipts, you submit all your invoices, you submit all the work that you've done, and then you get reimbursed for it. So it just depends on how the grant is written and how they're going to give it out. Other times there's a match. Sometimes they'll say you need to put 50% match or 100% match for everything that you are receiving. So if we're going to grant you $100,000 and you have 100% match, you also have to bring $100,000 to the table and demonstrate that you are also putting some funding in. So if you bring 100,000, you can get 100,000. If you bring 50, you get 50. So that's also a requirement of some grants. And that just shows that you have skin in the game, that you really believe in this project. So most federal grants will require a match. And so that is typical. There are different ways that you can provide that match. So that is all part of the requirements that you must meet. Is there a cost match? Is there quarterly reporting? Is there monthly meetings that you have to attend? So all this. So if you meet all those guidelines, and at the end of the year, the fiscal year, or the grant cycle, sometimes it's a 2 to 3 year cycle, sometimes it's a 1 year cycle. It just depends on the grant. If you've met all their requirements, you get to keep the funding. You don't have to pay anything back. Now, if you don't meet the requirements and you did not comply with all they put out there, you have to pay the money back, or you don't get reimbursed. So, or you only get a percentage of what you were able to comply with. So sometimes the other thing that happens is, let's say you're awarded the full $100,000 and your spend down should be $100,000, but you're not able to spend it all down, which happens sometimes because when you submit the budget, maybe you put in there too much in one area and too low in another, but you have to stick to whatever you submitted in your budget. So I'm just going to simplify it, and I'm going to say $100,000. You put in there $60,000 for personnel, for people that you hired, staff. And then the other 40,000, let's say, I'm just going to make it very simple. You put it in there for supplies and materials. Okay. Let's say as the year is going and it's a 1 year grant, you're going through the year and you were able to hire half of the staff, but not everybody you intended to hire. Right now, it's hard to find people. So let's say you were not able to hire everybody you needed for the full grant, and you only used up 30,000 of the funding. You wrote in your grant $30,000 for salaries for personnel. You weren't able to spend it down. It was supposed to be used for that, so you can't use it for anything else. That means you did not spend that money. So what happens to that money? You have to
Return.
pay it back, or you don't get it. So then of the $100,000 that you originally were awarded, you were only able to spend, let's say you spent the 40 plus the 30, that's $70,000. You were not able to tap into the 30,000. So this is a little bit of also being smart and knowing how to write for these grants, because if you're not able to use all the funds, you have to give it back. And it's really hard to use 100% of the funding.
Yeah.
You have to be really, really good. And you also have to know that there's how to revise, how to do a revision. So you're usually given an opportunity to do a budget revision once or twice throughout the grant cycle. So it's also having that experience on saying, okay, this is where we are right now. This is where we're moving in quarter 2. This is where we're moving in quarter 3. We're not going to be able to spend this amount down. We already know that we were not able to hire the people we were looking to hire. Let's reappropriate the funds and move them into supplies and material. We know we can spend on supplies and material. Let's reappropriate. So it's reallocating funds and knowing how to do that. So there's a little bit more to the grant funding and whether you receive it or not. It's also managing the budget correctly and complying with what you submitted originally, and they're going to hold you to that.
You can tell you are very sharp in this area. I love it. It's so good.
I'm not a numbers person, but I can understand that budgeting piece, and so I usually like to work with somebody who's strong with budgets in grant writing. So that's important too. Finding somebody who knows numbers really well, inside and out.
That's another thing you mentioned because there is someone that you work with when it comes to the grant writing process, but are you needing anything in regards of like say legal counsel or anything of that regard, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. No, not for the grant writing piece at all. You don't need to bring any attorneys involved. It's just the financing piece. Usually there's the 2 requirements of submitting your budget that matches what you are submitting through the application. And it just has to, they are connected. They go hand in hand because you are saying this is what I'm going to be using the funds for. And that's a really important piece of it. They're giving you all this money. Well, you have to be able to intelligently state this is how we're going to spend these funds, and then you have to be able to demonstrate it. But then they also have to make sure that whatever you're promising to do with those funds is also what's getting implemented. And they are looking for impact. It's a very basic equation, but they want to do the most impact with the dollars that they're giving you. So if you say, I'm going to take $100,000, I'm applying for $100,000, you're going to give me $100,000. What is the impact I'm going to have with that? I am going to be able to house 10 people. Okay, what is the cost of that per person? And if they read another application that says, I'm going to house 100 people with $100,000, who's going to get more impact out of the $100,000? The agency that's going to house 100, or the investor who's going to house 100, or the investor who's going to house 10? And so that also plays into it. So how you are spending those funds, what you're spending those funds in, and how you're, again, being a good steward of the funds that they're providing you. And where do these funds mostly come from?
Us.
So exactly. So am I a good steward of the taxpayers' funds?
Yeah.
And so it all ties together. So you're getting free money, but it's coming from the taxpayers. And if the taxpayers are going to now dig in and say, wait a minute, you just gave that organization or that company or that investor $100,000 to house 10 people?
No.
No.
Thank you.
No, thank you. No, thank you. But you housed 100 people. Okay, you know what? That's actually not bad. I can get on board with that. So anyway, that's all connected.
Yeah, that's one thing I was figuring, obviously these are taxpayer dollars, so it's very nice to see that there's some actual oversight that's going into it. That's helpful. So you mentioned, so they essentially tell you what they would like accomplished with the grant, but is there like an opposite? I mean, they disseminate it down to the local municipalities, so on and so forth, but is there a way to kind of provide that feedback to them to what they should be providing grants for at the
So it
national level?
depends on the grant. It depends on the grant. So CBDGs are very specific to it's an opportunity for the local municipalities to do what they want with those funds to help develop their communities. So
Gotcha.
that one specifically. But when you're looking at other grants, they could be, not everybody gets them. Not every city or every county or every state gets them. So it just depends on what they're looking to do. So maybe Illinois is very focused on providing housing for individuals who are reentering society from incarceration. But maybe Alabama is not. And so they're focused on another area. And so when they apply for those grants, they know specifically what their focus is. And that all kind of goes down to, what is it that they're wanting to accomplish? Each state has their own needs, their own ideas of what they want to do within their own state. So when they apply for the funding, they know what they're going after. They know what is of interest to them and what funds are available. And I'm talking just about states. But if I'm an entity, an organization, I'm looking at providing something specifically. So I'm going to cast my net out looking for funding for that area, that niche that I'm interested in funding. So I might be casting my net out for any funding that's available to the state, any funding that's available through the state, the county, the city. I'm also going to be looking at foundations. There are foundations all over the US, individuals who have created their own foundation, and they have an emphasis in this particular area that they want to they want to provide funding for. They want to see these areas flourish. And so then I'm going to go after those foundations. Sometimes there are foundations that just have a general, we have a foundation, we have money available. Send us a letter of interest and tell us what it is that you want to do. We're going to read through it. And if we think that this is something that we would like to fund, we'll go ahead and open an application for you so you can submit your application. And it could be general. But let's say, I'm trying to think, Tony Robbins is one that I was looking at his foundation. And that one is a very general one. It says submit a letter and then we'll review it and see what it is that you want to do with the funding. And then we'll go ahead and consider you. We'll send you an invitation to apply. Others are very specific. They could say, we are only focused on the environment. So now I know that if I am trying to maybe provide some housing that is environmental friendly, maybe I am looking at providing solar panels on all the properties, and I'm looking, it's environment focused. Then I know that maybe this is a foundation that I should pursue to apply for funding. So it really just depends. That's part of the research piece. Tell me what it is that you want to do. And then we go and cast a wide net out there. And then we start to narrow it a little bit, narrow it down until we find what works for you.
Oh, that's great. And I just realized how close we are on the time. So I want to make sure I am respectful of your time. So unfortunately, I could go on talking about this for quite a bit more. You obviously can. You're super sharp on this, which I love that. I love people that are passionate about what they do. It's always fun to talk to them. But real quick before we get kind of a good way for someone to contact you, what is your overarching, what's your Mount Everest? What's your goal here in the next, say, 5 years or so? Is it more geared towards that Latino community empowerment project, or what's your North Star, I guess?
So I love a good challenge and I love problem solving.
Clearly.
And that's my creative side. That's really where I just hone in on. So for me, the housing crisis is the challenge, is the problem. Another problem for me is that lack of legacy for the Latino community. And so I see myself creating my Mount Everest is to create housing, and it is to create to buy and create more housing for individuals who are victims or survivors of domestic violence or displaced families, and help them find safe and affordable housing. So that's kind of my Mount Everest, okay? But for me, the intent behind that is not only provide the housing, but whatever income I'm making from that, the passive income I'm making from that, to be able to then create my foundation where my focus will be on helping change my mindsets and educate the families who don't have legacies and don't know that you can have a legacy or how to create a legacy for your families. So that's kind of a longer term thing, but one will get me to the other. And I think the difficult thing is that because we are in a housing crisis, I want to do more and I want to create more housing. And so I recently discovered another need in the housing industry, which is more like the transitional temporary housing. And so I was thinking, I'm like, okay, maybe I can expand my Mount Everest to also provide units and increase that goal so I can provide more housing for workforce housing. And so I'm like, my mind, of course, starts to go on a tangent. And then I'm like, nope, let's reel you back in and
Reel
let's
that
stay
back in.
focused, reel it back in. So, housing, it ultimately is create more housing. And however I do it, I'm working in many different groups right now, trying to discover different ways that we can create more housing. And so, yeah, create more housing. That's really it. So,
Awesome.
I've narrowed it down, but it's for me, the grant writing, the grant funding that's available is one way that I'm going to tap into and see how I can create more housing through the grant funds that are available.
I
So,
love that. I think it's definitely an avenue that I might explore further as well because I think there's definitely some opportunity there. But since we are limited on time, what is the best way for someone to reach out to you? Obviously, like say if you have, I don't know if you offer one-on-one consultations for your business
yep.
consulting business, but
Yes.
also in addition to that, what's the best way for people to one, how to contact you, and what are your primary needs that they can help you with at this point in time?
Absolutely. So I do have my Instagram and my YouTube set up. I say set up. I've slowly starting to put videos on there, and so I'm getting better at that. But I've been doing more on Instagram. So the handle for both is at Luz Ramirez Consulting. So very simple. And yeah, that's the best way. DM me through there, and then I will get in touch with you and let you know how we can set up a consultation. I do have different options. I have a quick 15-minute, just kind of like check in, like what is it that you're looking for, what is it you need, or what is it that you think I can help you with. And from there, I can say, okay, you know what? Yeah, you let's schedule a consultation, and the consultation is paid. And then at that point, I will actually send out a form that you need to complete beforehand. Give me more information about where you are, what your business is, your entity. And then once I have that information, I can then say, okay, let's jump on a consultation. I have more information about you, and here's what I see that you need, and here's where you want to go, and here's what we can do for you. And then once I get that in place, I can submit a proposal and say, okay, you tell me where you want to move from there. So it kind of gives them next steps, some guidance on how I can be helpful to them, or the information I give them kind of allows them enough information they can go and do on their own for those who want to do on their own.
That's great. I absolutely love that. Well, I will definitely be putting that contact information in the show notes. And yeah, definitely reach out to Luz. She is, as if you haven't figured it out by now, she is very well versed in what she does. She is a sharp individual. So definitely reach out to her. But yeah, thanks again, Luz, for coming on the show. This has been absolutely amazing. I appreciate you being so generous with your time. Especially we went over a little bit, so but I greatly appreciate it. And with that, guys, thank you for tuning in, and that's a wrap for today. All right, see ya. Bye.
Thank you.